This week on The Battle, Blood Feast versus Women Behind Bars. Let's get it on!
Broadcasting from a project studio that's more project than studio. It's Cinema Diabolica's Battle of the Band B Movies. The show that will once and for all crown an undisputed king of Britain's video nasties. And now, here's your hosts, F13 and DZ.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Cinema Diabolica's Battle of the Band B Movies, episode 2. I don't think we're going to be keeping track of the shows by numbers, so let's just go ahead and stop doing that right now. Our features this week are Blood Feast. I don't know why. I know the features all the way up until the time that I have to say them, and then I immediately forget. The features are Blood Feast and Women Behind Bars. I am F13.
This is DZ.
And, I liked how leisurely you said that. This is DZ, a man of leisure and possibly danger. You don't know. Well, folks, we do know. We do know about all the danger that presents itself when you are alone with DZ. DZ, we've got an
really?
email. Yes, I don't know where I was going with that, so I decided to cut it short. That was one of my New Year's resolutions, actually, to give up on jokes when it becomes apparent they're not going to be funny. Just cut and run. Don't try and drag it out anymore. Just let it go.
Oh, we can do that.
Mm-hmm. And we time will show that we are going to quite a bit, actually.
Okay, this train wreck needs to get back on the rails.
We got a voicemail. I fucked it up again. We got an email. After saying that we never get emails last week, someone else decided to send an email. It's from Blue Yonder is the name of on the email there. I hear he's wild. Says, hey, F13 and DZ, Justin from the Hysteria Continues podcast and Hysteria Lives website here. Mm-hmm. I meant to write before to say how much I was enjoying the show. Before what? Before this recent break or before the break before that? Before that time that we quit or the previous time? I'm not sure. Cinema Diabolica was the first podcast I ever heard and is still one of my must-listen-to shows. Well, thank you, Justin, from Hysteria Continues podcast and Hysteria Lives website. I really appreciate that. DZ, do you appreciate it?
I certainly do. You know, we're the podcast that won't die.
Mm-hmm. No matter how much you want us to, we will not go away. We'll be sitting here reviewing like Disney movies and like stuff that's intended for like 8-year-old little girls.
Oh, don't tease me. Well, no, okay, wait, no. I shouldn't have said that after the last part you said. Disney movies is what I was responding. Oh, my God.
I got you again. All right. Justin says, I love the idea of the Battle of the Nasties, although the thought of actually rewatching them again, all I can say is rather you than me. Yes?
Well, you know what I'm thinking is we need to have a I Survived the Nasties t-shirt with the checklist on the back.
He got nasty and all I got was this stupid t-shirt. I don't know. Something like that.
Yes. No, we'll have variations.
Oh, okay. I like variations. If there's one
Get
thing
nasty
I like.
with me.
Being British, I was a young teenager back when all the Nasties hysteria kicked off. So let's see. A teenager when the Nasties hysteria kicked off. So
older than us.
I don't know if I should say best, but so let's say 13, the youngest possible to be considered a teenager. And this is what, 1974, 1975? Or no, this is the 80s. So that would be...
at least, 81, 82?
I will say 83 for sake of argument. So 13 and 83. Ooh. Sir, you are old. And it was a scary time indeed. I thought I could shed a little light on the mysteries of this turbulent era. I really appreciate this, actually. It's coming from someone who's got a first-hand knowledge of what was happening at the time in the area, no less.
This is sort of like the common person's perspective on what happened. I like that.
I do too. It's like it's a commentary from someone who actually knows what they're talking about, and not two jagoffs that are just pretending to. I thought I could shed a little light on the mysteries of this turbulent era. You were a little mystified as when night school was on the list. Firstly, we don't have night schools here in the UK, which explains the punning terrorized name switch. That makes sense. You said, do they not have night schools in the UK? And I said, I'm just pretty sure there was another movie called that. Apparently, they don't have night schools there, so they wouldn't have known what that was. Where was I? Yes, the film was actually certificated. I don't know if that's the right word there, buddy. We're gonna have to send that one to the judges.
Well, hold on.
I think
he's British.
Certified. Oh, that's true. It might. Yeah, that is kind of a nice, get out of jail free card. Anytime a British person uses bad grammar, they can just go, no. That's how we say it here in the old GB. Not that you and Americans would know anything about that anyway. The film was actually, we'll say, certified for cinema release, albeit cut by a minute, but as with a number of other nasties, that wasn't enough to stop it being fingered by the long arm of the law. Now, that's interesting to me. So they actually submitted the film for certification, it got a certificate, and then it was still singled out and banned.
I think that's sort of a guilt by association situation, possibly.
Right.
It's like, oh, this was on the list at some point, so we're going to screw over anybody who has this too, along with these 71 other films.
Trying to assign any method to the madness is tricky, and that's kind of what that's the idea that I got from watching the documentaries. There is that, much like our MPAA now. It seems very scattershot and very random. Whilst gorier films such as Friday the 13th or Superstition passed by unnoticed, a film such as Night School probably fell foul to the nasty's probe because its video cover depicted the bloodiest scene in the movie. That's really kind of a fucking shame. When you don't have a board that's rating everything fairly and evenly across the board, it's just like the stuff that comes to their attention is the stuff that gets banned.
Well, it's like we said before that the marketing was really key in them even noticing these movies. Yeah. It's sort of like, what if Friday the 13th, the cover for that had shown the Kevin Bacon arrow through the throat scene? That would have probably landed it on the list. Right.
Although it seems silly in retrospect, it was often the covers of the films or even just their titles that would single them out for attention. That is something that we found in all the documentaries and things that I've read. They all do say that sometimes it was just the title that singled them out.
Legend. I think we're seeing that with our two movies this week.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to get to, is that I think that's kind of a case of it here, although it may or may not actually be. That might just be perspective coloring our view of it. Legend has it that both the comedy Best Little Whorehouse in Texas and the war film The Big Red One were confiscated from one video store by bungling police that mistook them for pornos. And this just goes to show there's no checks and balances. It's just a bunch of jackbooted thugs just going about and doing as they please, basically, without any kind of actual research or written word behind it. Just, hey, that looks like it might be dirty. Take it.
Well, I do find it funny that The Big Red One,
right?
By title alone, I think that's hilarious. I can see the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas just by name alone, coming under a watchful eye.
But The Big Red One, what are you thinking? Get your mind out of the gutter.
It's about dogs.
It's about Clifford. To also put things into context, serious consideration was made to banning any video for home use that wasn't suitable for children. Thankfully, that didn't come to pass. A great introduction to the era is the Video Nasties documentary put out by Nucleus Films, which I believe is the one of the ones we watched. I had the pleasure of being involved in the follow-up, which covers the additional 82 titles that were officially designated under Section 3 of the Obscene Publications Act by the Director of Public Prosecutions. These titles were liable for seizure and forfeiture by the police, removed from sale or hire, and then destroyed, although they were not ultimately prosecuted. So that's interesting. They didn't actually prosecute them. They just took it upon themselves to confiscate and destroy them.
Well, splitting hairs a little bit, it's not a bad situation. I mean, think about it. It's suffer jail time or get slapped with a fine as opposed to just having materials confiscated. I'd probably go with having materials confiscated. Yeah,
that's a good point. But I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is just very, very, very odd to me, and I hate it. Let's see, an idea for a follow-up if you're feeling masochistic enough. Anyway, looking forward to this year's delights, Justin. Well, thank you very much, Justin, and check out his show there, Hysteria Continues podcast and the Hysteria Lives website. I wish I had done a little research before the show and gotten a URL, but I don't have one. So just use the Googles. Use the Googleizer and search a Hysteria Continues podcast. I'm sure you'll be able to find it.
They can't click on your voice, so it's okay. They can look it up.
I don't know what that means. Anywho, our first feature this week is Blood Feast, and that is up next.
It all started about 3 months ago. One of the officials said he'd seen his wife walking in the village at night, only she'd been dead for 2 days.
He seemed to get a perverted kick out of making the poor son of a bitch suffer.
Here, listen!
You're listening to Cinema Diabolica, #1 with a bullet.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to witness some scenes from the next attraction to play this theater. This picture, truly one of the most unusual ever filmed, contains scenes which under no circumstances should be viewed by anyone with a heart condition or anyone who is easily upset. We urgently recommend that if you are such a person or the parent of a young or impressionable child now in attendance, that you and the child leave the auditorium for the next 90 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next feature to play on this show is Blood Feast. You know, I really don't know what I was getting at there. But in this corner, hailing from 1963, weighing in at 67 minutes, that's not right, Blood Feast, a creation of our good buddy, Herschel Gordon Lewis.
No, 67 minutes is accurate. It was only 1 hour and 7 minutes.
Jesus Christ! Okay? Well, I won't say anymore. We'll just go on with our IMDb style synopsis. An Egyptian caterer kills various women in suburban Miami to use their body parts to bring to life a dormant Egyptian goddess, while an inept police detective tried to track him down.
I don't know if, on second viewing, I don't know if the detective was that inept. He did make some interesting jumps where you go,
right? Oh,
okay, so he was on the case.
Right.
I think it's his captain who was the inept one.
Yeah, I think they were all a little inept. I mean, let's not split hairs. They were all kind of in that level of ineptitude somewhere in there. Now, this is definitely a movie that we've covered before.
If we had taken the time, we would have found what episode that was. But it was definitely early on. I want to say it's before episode 10. Yeah,
it definitely is before episode 10. I'm looking through the feed right now to find, let's see here, Blood Horror Blood, episode 11. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer and Anthropophagus. No, that's not it. All right, you go ahead with your notes, and I'll find this out.
Well... so we have covered this before, and I don't know if we're gonna have necessarily anything new to say other than this is a fun as hell movie, and it's got garish blood, it's got overacting. I mean, Mr. Ramses, it's the second time around. I'm just like, he's funny as hell. I'm digging this movie even more now than I did, I think, when we originally watched it. I do remember saying that at one point that I made the comment that this is a movie that shows you essentially how not to make a movie, and I'm going to say that's actually incorrect. I think this is made as well as they could, and they ran with it, and I totally appreciate that. I'm retracting my original statement on this film.
Blood Feast is one hell of a lot of fun. When you look at what else was happening in the world of horror movies at that time, Herschel Gordon Lewis, he took a huge leap forward with explicit gore and guts and stuff and nudity and stuff on the screen. No one else was really doing that kind of thing at the time.
Yeah, the blood is just amazing. It's so garish and so bright, and and that initial scene where he's cutting the woman up in the bathtub, that actually is pretty horrifying. It's like I have kind of fresh eyes on it, or at least maybe an aged perspective, and I can see why people would be a little upset with just kind of 1963 with the level of kind of shock that would come with a movie like this. Before this, I mean, I think they were still basically making a lot of black and white films, so there, that kind of effect would be muted. But in this case, I mean, you've got a girl's brains scattered on the beach,
right?
looking back on that, I'm like, that actually looked pretty damn horrifying.
Yeah, I wish I could see video. I wish I could see video of people watching the film in the theater. I want to see exactly how horrified people were watching this, because I mean, you have to remember, people fainted. And I stumbled out of the theater vomiting after seeing The Exorcist. Now, granted, Blood Feast is nowhere near a film like The Exorcist, but still, it's got to be so much more extreme than anyone's really used to seeing at that point.
Right, and I think word of mouth definitely helped this movie. That's fairly true of a lot of horror films, but in this case, it would be, just that, you won't believe your eyes. And it's, when you're hearing that from a friend who's telling you about a movie you just saw, then it just becomes even more intense. You were saying about The Exorcist, and where that one's, that one's it's like a strange beast by comparison, because it's definitely more drama than this one is. This one's, it's got its kind of cartoon aspects to it. But what is it about, making specially seasoned god stew that just makes this movie a bit more wild? It's like we've got god stew in this one, and we've got pea vomit in The Exorcist. What is it about, that particular blend that has to be in these kind of religious-oriented movies?
That's a good question.
Oh, and something I don't think I really noticed it before, but the detective Pete, who he looks like he's in his late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
He has a pretty inappropriate relationship with Suzette, the birthday girl, and
right. And the fact that he says he offers to drive her home because there's a killer about, and then he says to her, I think you might be safer with the killer than with me. I was like, oh, okay, let's back it up there, Rapey. Let's just let's take a minute and think about what we're doing with our life.
Yeah, this coming from Detective Anal.
Why anal? Wait, never mind.
Because he doesn't want.
I know why.
He doesn't want any proof.
Yeah, no, I know.
I don't want her getting pregnant.
Jesus Christ on a cross, folks. Let's just. I'm going to tell you. Hey, hold up for a second. Let's think about what we're doing with our lives.
Okay, so there's some lines, and especially when they're delivered by Mr. Ramses, that I know that you have a favorite, because you've actually used it several times on the course of the shows. But I love, what do you consider unusual?
Right. That's always a good one.
And then, well, actually, this one's from the detective. This man's uncanny, as he slams the folder down. It's like, who would say that about a killer these days? It's
the police chief was a delight to watch, because he's such a doofus that it's like a doofus amongst doofi, if that's a word, which it isn't. He was everything that came out of his mouth was gold.
Yeah, it was because I think he was nervous as hell. If I'm not mistaken, he was the one who actually had to have the notes in front of him for his lines.
Right. Which is why he always had paperwork in front of him, and he was always filmed at a desk. As you can see, my dear, I'm an old man. Gross. What is she saying?
Hop up on this counter.
Hop on the counter, and I'll show you exactly how old a man I am. The boyfriend on the beach and his awful crying.
Oh my God.
It's almost like he was coughing.
That actually just needs to be put on a loop.
Yeah, there needs to be a loop of that.
It's so insane.
I'm going to, so I went to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and saw an installation. I forget who the artist was, but it was all like the uncomfortable close-ups of people's faces from Psycho. All of the tight close-ups on people's faces, all those clips, each clip of that of those shots was running in its own television, and like the TVs were like in a pile, it was like a shape that they'd made with the TVs, and they were running at I think 1/32 the normal speed, and I guess the idea was the study of the uncomfortable closeness of someone else's face to yours, and how like awkward and tense that a moment that can create. Next to that, I'm gonna have that running. Now I'm gonna have my own installation of him crying at full volume, at full speed, with yakety sax playing in the background. So it'll just basically be an actual poignant, art installation, flanked by this ridiculous horse shit, where it's just why would they do that to my? And I think it'll juxtapose very nicely.
Well, I you can include with that. You could do the what is it? The Battle of the Banjos. What is that?
Oh,
from Deliverance.
That's fuck. Nah,
the dueling banjos.
Yeah, dueling banjos.
Okay, so dueling banjos with Tony crying and the one girl's mother crying, because there is another horrible crying scene.
Yes.
She didn't even get to wear the dress that I made her.
That was quality. That was a quality reenactment, DZ. Thank you very much for that. I will never, ever. I think I might actually use that clip in a promo.
No.
Cinema Diabolica for quality film. For quality film analysis. She never got to wear. Okay, maybe I was lying. This movie it's a riot. It's really fun. I enjoy the shit out of this movie. I every time I watch it, I always say along with him, have you ever heard of an Egyptian feast? Joyfully. It's incredibly garish and like soaked in color. It's really odd that the violence and the gore is all played so campy and so like ridiculously as to kind of take the edge off. Do you remember when Do you remember when we watched what is that French film, Inside?
Oh.
Do you remember how fucking horrified you were when you watched that? Like, that movie is incredibly cruel and unflinching and harsh and mean-spirited, and movies like that and Serbian film and what was the other one that came out at that same time? It was a French movie. Girl gets kidnapped and tortured nonstop.
Martyrs.
Movies like that are just incredibly cruel and just an assault on the senses. I mean, you look at the amount of gore. I mean, it's an interesting statement on like the amount of gore and, murder and or violence, but it's presented in such a silly, ridiculous, over the top way that it's safe.
Well, and that's the important thing about film is that, when you're watching these scenes where, something horrifying has happened, that, the blood being too red, that actually helps remind you that you are watching a film. Right.
It not being that dark, deep, actual blood color. I mean, if the point of art is to inflame, isn't it also to like manipulate and adjust? And like, it's kind of like an Andy Kaufman level, like inside joke to be able to show these horrific atrocities to people and have them kind of laugh and, elbow each other in the ribs. Like, haha, check this out. When in another similar situation, they'd be like looking through their fingers and like terrified.
Yeah, it's just depending on what story, and there's nuances. I mean, there's so many levels to how you can actually present a story. There
definitely are. So let's see here. Let's get into the rundown. Blood Feast. Blood Feast had 9 scenes of violence, gore, or cruelty. Only 1 scene of sexploitation. You see in the very beginning of the film, you see the girl in the bathtub. You see her tits through a sheen of blood, and that was it. Aside from that, there were no other scenes of sexploitation in this movie.
Yeah, and when we were kind of discussing this earlier, it was like, well, there was this scene and this scene, and it was like, she was in a bra, and making out, I don't think that really
if you can show it on like television, then it's not really considered sexploitation or enough to be considered for the scoring purposes.
Though I do have to say that scene with Tony making out with his girlfriend, he's really trying to make the moves on her, and it's like it actually gets pretty uncomfortable. Yeah,
but here's the thing. I don't know if that was really uncomfortable at the time. I think at the time it was probably just like, hey, this boys will be boys. Tee-hee, this is what they do. But now, looking through history's eye, we can see like, oh boy, Jesus Christ, dude, back it up. Back it up.
Well, and then again, also, it's like, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right. That's also an interesting thing to consider. This movie
love the shit out of this movie.
Yeah, man. Lots of enjoyment, but that's not how we're scoring them. So let's start this from the beginning. 9 scenes of violence, gore, or cruelty. 1 scene of sexploitation. It had camp, kitsch, blood-soaked boobies, dangerously wooden acting, engorged Technicolor, overly dramatic organ, timpani drum abuse, and lots of uptight, waspy white folks.
Oh, And inappropriate love affairs.
Extremely inappropriate love affairs. So cumulatively, Blood Feast scores a 10. It looks like. Is that enough? Is that going to be enough to beat Women Behind Bars? We'll have to see. But as for does Blood Feast deserve to be on the Video Nasties list? I had a really hard time with that. I mean, it does have an abundance of blood and gore and violence in it. I definitely don't think children should see anything of this movie.
Yeah, I'm thinking that in part this was one of those title, claims. It's like it's called the Blood Feast or Blood Feast,
right?
And that might give you, point to cause. It might get you to pause at like, okay, what's in there? And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that the cover at the time might have been the tongue ripping scene, or not the scene itself, but the after effect where her face is just covered in blood.
Right, the girl with the bloody mouth.
Yeah, I think it might have been that. So it makes me wonder, if that was an aspect of it and why it got on the list.
Right.
Aside from the fact that there's some human butchery in this movie.
Yeah,
and there's a whip scene. So
does Blood Feast belong on the Video Nasties list? I'm going to say yes, but grudgingly.
Yeah, it's kind of like a half yes.
It kind of has to be on the list because of all the gore, and there is a scene with tits, and it kind of has to be on there because it's extremely gory and shows lots of like elective surgery, if you will. But I'm gonna say grudgingly yes. I really don't think that it belongs there, but maybe that's just me. Who knows? Anywho's, Women Behind Bars, after this.
Delightful.
Hey kids, do you want to help out Cinema Diabolica any way that you can? I didn't think so, but I reserved the studio time, so we're going through with this anyway. Here's a few ways you can help Cinema Diabolica right now. Subscribe on YouTube and like our videos. Leave us 5-star reviews on iTunes. Friend us and like show posts on Facebook. And of course, you can drunk dial us at 510-698-9066. And drunk email us at cinemadiabolica@gmail.com. Cinema Diabolica. We don't want your money, just your love.
L'histoire d'un hold-up sensationnel, aux conséquences tragiques. Un film violent, actuel.
Arrêtez! Surlève, viens dans la voiture. Quant à vous, colonel de Brienne.
All right. That's enough of that. Unfortunately, that French trailer is the only trailer that exists for this movie, or at least that I could find. But I think that probably reveals a few things about this movie that we'll get into in a little bit. And the opponent in this corner, Women Behind Bars, hailing from 1975 and weighing in at 75 minutes. Our IMDb style synopsis says a small-time hood brings the attention of the law with an insurance scam and diamond theft, but things become even more interesting when his moll murders him and is slammed behind bars where she faces all manner of electric shock treatments to various parts of her anatomy.
Okay, half of that is true.
About 50% of it, and even then, it's only kind of, it's only ancillary truth. So the beginning of this movie has a fairly long info dump where it's just like, okay, all of this stuff just happened. Got it? Okay, moving on.
Yeah, my note on that was, what is this with documentary style narration in the 70s?
Right. It's almost like they just needed to get into the main crux of the film. They didn't care how they got there. And here's my question. If none of that shit ever comes up again or has any bearing on the rest of the movie, then what the fuck was the point of it?
It was set up. It was total fluff. They were like, we've got beautiful scenery shots. Our secondary director, took a lot of footage here.
Right, but that's the point. Then, isn't it? It has no worth. It doesn't mean anything. It is totally pointless. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of weird, pointless shit that our buddy Jess Franco did in this film. There's a scene where a gentleman's calling his friend in the in the prison, and he's, you know, obviously in a place or time in the world where they need an operator to connect, but all of it happens and he gets disconnected halfway through, but the whole call plays out like this. Hello, operator, I'd like to speak to the Pennsylvania 65000, please. Okay, yes, I'll wait. Hello, Jim, is that you? Listen, Jim, I need you to get me in to see her at the prison. What do you mean they won't allow me? Hello? Operator, I think I got disconnected. Can you reconnect me? Hello, Jim? And it's like, what the fuck was the point of that? Why?
No, actually, it gets even worse. The guy in question that you're talking about, the insurance adjuster or investigator, he gets out of his car. We see him walk, hearing his feet scuffling on the ground, the entire distance to his hotel room. And then we see him get his room. I mean, there's these little filler points that you're like, I would have rather had the narration.
But here's the thing, if they were like, you know, long shots of like gorgeous scenery with the film's soundtrack playing behind it, you maybe could argue that it was an establishing shot, that it was meant to, you know, establish a feel or something, and not just long, dreary, boring, indulgent garbage.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where they have the skeleton of an idea, and you know,
that comes to play more than you realize.
Yeah, you know, plenty of movies or even stories have done padding.
Right.
So you know, this is just another example of one of those. Especially when you get into the real nitty gritty of this, you go, none of this really needed to be done this way. It makes very little sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It just seems like, it's like you said, they had the framework of a story and just kind of filled in the gaps to get to the story.
Yeah. Oh, and the half of the synopsis that you read from IMDb takes place within the first 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, like 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. Now, see, here's an interesting comment that I found about this film. This must be the film Jess made for another producer whilst working on Barbed Wire Dolls for producer Erwin C. Dietrich. When Dietrich discovered Franco had used his resources, including actors, to make another film for someone else at the same time on the sly, he said, well, at least I got the good one.
Yeah, so
basically that explains everything. Jess Franco basically used the resources, Erwin C. Dietrich's resources from his production of Barbed Wire Dolls to make this movie on the sly for someone else and another quick payday.
Which is an interesting business decision. That sounds very Corman-like.
Yeah, that is definitely a Roger Corman, Lloyd Kaufman style business move.
Hopefully the actors got paid. Not saying that they deserved their pay for this movie.
Oh, they deserve something.
Yeah, there's the nudity in this movie is extremely extensive. I mean, you were talking about long establishing shots. There's just long leering shots. Right.
Well, see, the thing about this movie is the first part of it, the early parts of this movie, the violence is very subdued. You know, like the people being shot, they're in very wide angles. You know, like it's a very wide shot, so it's kind of, you know, it's not very shocking. It's, you know, not really played for shock. It's just kind of like, hey, here's the thing that happens. And then a lot of the early nude scenes and a lot of the early nude scenes and what have you are the whole thing is just very dreary and dull. They almost come across as clinical. You know, it's like, okay, here's some nude people. This isn't turning me on at all. This is not even, it's not played lascivious. It's just kind of boring. And then the movie makes a turn and it just ratchets up the cruelty and the exploitation and the sexploitation with very, very explicit lesbian sex scenes, with extremely cruel scenes of violence and torture. Torture really gets under the skin for me. Women being whipped, nude whippings, electrocutions, just stuff like that. It's just, it gets extremely harsh in a short period of time after being very subdued for the first part of the film.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking is that this is one of those one-take films where it's like they really didn't have the time. I mean, considering they were working on another film at the same time, it was one of those one-take films. It's like, we cannot do too many takes. We don't have the time for it, so we'll just make the best of it. And, here's what I want you to do. And so people weren't going to make dramatic moves.
Right, yeah.
Or dynamic moves in order to get anything across. They were just going to, sit there or stand there.
Right. Mr. Franco, I flubbed my line. Keep rolling. Okay, if you're sure. Let's continue.
You're naked. You don't have any motive. What are you talking about?
What's my motivation? Being nude, obviously. Shit. Yeah, the whole movie is very kind of pointless. It leaves you with a very and the ending, which I'm going to spoil now, so fucking skip ahead 20 seconds if you don't want to hear this. Is basically the exact same as the beginning. She gets broken out of jail by somebody who just wants the diamonds, just like in the beginning of the movie, and there's no diamonds, just like in the beginning of the movie, and she shoots him and walks away, just like in the beginning of the movie. And I don't know. Although this time she doesn't turn herself in, which makes you wonder, why did she do it in the first place?
Exactly.
None of the movie really makes much sense. It all, like I said, is basically just a means to an end to get to the nudity and violence. They're trying to make a spectacle of a movie, but in my estimation, they made more of a snore fest.
Yeah, I mean, when your nudity is boring, it's like, go to a nude beach if you want to see naked people. It's like. You don't need to spend money on a rental. Right. That's not a necessity. You can get by without that. Yeah. So, not impressed with this film. No. Did you have any more notes? Let's see here. Where he's making it we totally need to see him walk to the hotel and book a room. Wait, how am I supposed to know where he is if I don't watch him book the room? The thing is that he says something about the building, like, I approached the building, and it's like, wait a minute, what's the importance of this building? And then it's like, oh, it's just a fucking hotel. What is this, a bait and switch? Mm-hmm. And then how did the insurance guy connect the heist with the murder? It was like so immediate. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. It's a leap of logic that would impress Columbo. Yeah, you do come across it every once in a while in just some poorly thought out investigation films where it's like, yeah, that doesn't connect. You do kind of get an answer to that later, but it's still it doesn't pay off. This movie just does not pay off. No, it really doesn't. And I did have at one point, is all of this a put on? And it turns out I'm right. Yeah, basically. So, what was the point of any of it? If none of it matters, then what was the point of any of it? Yeah. So people making weird decisions just to make a movie. It's like, oh, I think I'm going to be the subject of a film. I have to go to prison in order to make the story work. Right. I'm going to voluntarily go to prison and then do the exact same thing that I did before, and then voluntarily choose not to go to prison this time. I don't fucking understand. Yeah, when she called the police at the beginning, I thought, oh, okay, so we're going with that direction for the story, where she's either kind of laying low or setting off the heat, basically cooling down the heat for herself for what she's done, and she really does have the diamonds, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's like when she breaks out of prison, I was like, wait a minute, that's actually a disconnect. Right. See, that's what I thought as well. I thought, oh, okay, so there's no connection between the diamond heist and her killing her abusive boyfriend. So she kills him to eliminate anyone who knows that she has the diamonds, voluntarily goes to jail so there'll be no loose ends, does the time as a spurned lover, gets out of jail, and then has the diamonds and is totally scot-free with nothing connecting her, except she breaks out of jail. She never had the diamonds. She knew she never had the diamonds. She willingly kills someone else to help her break out of jail that she willingly put herself into in the first place, and it's just like, what the fuck? Yeah. It spirals into the toilet. Into the shitter. So our rundown for this is whopping 8 scenes of violence, gore, or cruelty, 5 scenes of sexploitation. It had lesbian love romps, shocking scenes of electrocution, sadistic wardens, strangulations, betrayal, and the dreariest excuse for a plot on this side of the Atlantic. So the question comes,
does this movie belong on the Video Nasties list? Aside from being extremely boring, it is full of nudity and sexploitation and has a bunch of extremely cruel scenes of torture. So I'm going to say yes, it does.
Yeah, it does, and not even begrudgingly.
No, that's a clear cut. Once you get
to those scenes, you're like, okay, I can see why. And in the title, "Women Behind Bars," it kind of elicits its own, image.
Right. So as far as the versus aspect of our show today, unfortunately, "Women Behind Bars" is clearly the winner here. Even though I did not enjoy this movie at all. And I love Blood Feast. That's not what we're here for. We're here to judge the nastiest. And unfortunately, Blood Feast, aside from having a lot of ridiculous tempera paint gore, is not very nasty and is this week's loser. "Women Behind Bars" is a clear-cut winner, and we'll be moving on.
It's saying something that when Snuff and "Women Behind Bars" are going into the next round, what kind of, it's like, hey, if you want to be noticed on the Video Nasties list, it's like, oh, here, first of all, get a time machine.
Right.
But otherwise, just, you don't have to have a plot. You don't have to have you don't have to have really anything other than scenes of violence and throw in some titties. And, actually, I wouldn't be surprised that if one teeny tiny shot of dong would land you on the nasties list too.
Yeah, more than likely. And it's, like I said, it's just really a shame. This movie sucks, and it's going to be eliminated from in the next phase. It's going to be knocked out pretty fucking quickly and very easily as well. So it just sucks that it's going on.
I mean, look at what Snuff had. It was a pretty big score.
It just sucks that this is the one that's going on. But then, I mean, I guess Blood Feast would be knocked out pretty quickly as well because it's, like I said, it's not very nasty. So that's it. That's the show for this week. Our features next week are going to be "I Miss You, Hugs and Kisses" versus "The Cannibal Man." So that's going to be pretty sweet. We're coming up on a couple really big heavy hitters on the list here. I'm looking down here. We got Love Camp 7 coming up soon. Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. See, I'm interested in seeing a movie that's not necessarily very violent or gory or cruel, that is just heavy with sex.
Yeah, heavy sex. It's like we should throw in a random porno.
We should make a movie called Heavy Sex.
Heavy Sex?
Right, and it would just be about having sex under a high-gravity environment so you can barely move.
Oh, man, all you'd have is scenes of them going...
yeah. It's really hard to have sex.
Environment.
It's really hard to have sex, but that doesn't matter because I can't even breathe.
My boner is bent down. This is so hard.
You better believe that that's coming back too. I'm going to take all these clips and I'm just going to make one greatest hits of DZ promo. Why should you listen to Cinema Diabolica? This is why. I can't move my boulder. Various clips about raping people's shoes and just, all sorts of good stuff.
I think this whole year of nasties is going to bring out the worst in me.
I was going to say, yeah, this is the by far the most horror we've ever done because we would do it here and there, but we were mostly a giallo show rather than straight horror films. So this is going to bring out probably the worst in both of us, although I don't know how I could get any worse.
It'll be a delicious experience.
I don't know that it will be, but it will definitely be an experience.
We need to end this.
We do need to end this.
Week 3 or 4, wherever the hell we're at.
It'll be week 3. So this has been your Battle of the Band B movies. "Women Behind Bars" was your clear-cut winner. I am F13.
This is DZ.
And we will see you next week.